You are now being recorded. Apparently, I've got to tell you, or else I'm committing a crime. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Asking for a Friend. I'm Louise, and this is my co-host Adam. Hello, Adam.
Hello, Louise. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Did you have a nice winter?
Wintermas. Yeah, I actually called it Christmas. So just if anyone, straight from the off, I called it Christmas. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was nice and relaxing. Spent some time with my partner's family. We had lots of good food, a little bit to drink. Just had a really nice, relaxing time.
I had octopus on Christmas Day, me and my son.
Octopus.
Yeah. We went to like a really nice restaurant in Marrakesh, as you do, on Christmas Day. Because it's a Muslim country, so there wasn't a lot of Christmas going on, which was absolutely fine. So I just thought, do you know what? I'm just going to have something really different. So we both had octopus. Feel sorry for the octopus, obviously. But it was delicious.
It tasted good, did it?
Yeah.
Could you tell in the Muslim country that you went to, Morocco, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Could you tell it was Christmas time? Was there anything at all that would indicate it was Christmas?
Well, very, very little. So I saw a TikTok or some other such thing, which obviously means it's absolutely true, that said something like Christmas for Muslims is not halal. And so maybe it's like an actual bad thing to do it. So the only thing we saw was outside one quite expensive restaurant, there was a row of 3 cutout figurines on the wall, and they'd put a Santa hat on each one. So that was the most Christmasness I saw in Marrakesh.
I was just curious, as I've always thought about going abroad that time of year, but I've never actually done it.
Yeah, I only went because I've got no mates.
Oh, well, at least you got a bit of warmer weather anyway.
It was lovely. It was sunny all week, really nice.
Excellent.
Anyway, I understand that you've got some riveting numbers to talk about this week.
Yeah, riveting if you like figures, and if you like talking about which direction the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is going in.
Talking to a maths teacher, my friend. I love numbers.
Listen, us and our 2 listeners will be absolutely delighted then. As a bit of background, my dad used to be the service overseer in my home congregation. And he also really loved maths and playing about with figures and working out percentages and all that kind of stuff. So when he became the service overseer, one of his jobs was, I think it was at the end of each service year, he had to do a 20-minute or 30-minute talk on a Thursday night, explaining how we'd done in the previous service year. And that was his thing. Like, he loved it because he'd just get a spreadsheet and get all the figures on it. And I remember him saying to me one time, I'm really struggling to find anything positive in this service report.
No, really? Wow.
So it was his mission to kind of spin it in a positive way. And I can't remember for the life of me how he did that. But so I kind of took a love of figures from him. So yeah, that's what's driven this episode, really.
I must admit, every time the yearbook came out at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, I can't remember, I used to love looking at those data tables at the back, even from when I was a kid, just looking at the big numbers, the little numbers. I used to love looking at the ratio of witnesses to population in all the different countries, because I think like back in the 80s in Pakistan there were like millions of people and 335 witnesses, and I always used to think, how are those people ever going to have the opportunity to find the truth? And what a travesty that they'll all be destroyed when there's only 335 Jehovah's Witnesses to preach.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to ask you about that actually, how you reacted when the yearbook came out, and I was exactly the same. I used to really get excited when the yearbook came out because it was a shiny little book and it had lots of colourful pictures and there was always some really good stories from around the world.
And then you used to turn it landscape to sit to read the tables, and I loved it. I just loved it.
Yeah, actually, the point you've just touched on, Louise, there's a little bit of research I did when I was looking through the figures, and I was looking at blind spots for the organization. So basically, when you're a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm sure listeners will agree with this, the rhetoric that you're given from the platform at the meetings is that the preaching work is steaming ahead. Almost the whole world is being reached. We're getting to corners of the globe that, we never would have thought, high up in the mountains in the Himalayas and out in the deserts and the little islands in the Pacific. And since I left in 2017, I started to wonder about that because I never or rarely saw the witnesses out knocking on doors. And in probably the last 7 years, I've never had a knock on my door. I've never really seen them out that much. And I thought it'd be really interesting to see what kind of population numbers are not included in the yearbook report. So, for example, China, where witnesses are banned, there's 1.4 billion people.
Oh, of course. I see what you mean. Yeah. So we just don't report from that because it's banned. So you don't get the stats in there. But that's a big chunk of. Yeah.
Yeah. So I imagine that there are some people who are Jehovah's Witnesses in China doing some kind of preaching work underground. But there's not going to be a lot. So there's 1.4 billion people in China who are probably never going to speak to a witness. But then I thought, well, I wonder how far this goes. So there was China, 1.4 billion. India has 1.4 billion people, and there are 57,000 witnesses. So the ratio is pretty staggering there as well. And I won't read out all the figures, but I'll just list some of the countries.
No, read them all out. Read them all out.
Loads. So these were the countries where there's no witnesses reporting that we can see, or that there are a very minute number of witnesses reporting in relation to the country's population. So we've mentioned 2: China, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Russia, Ethiopia, Egypt, Vietnam, Iran, Turkey, Thailand, Sudan. Just those countries contribute 4.2 billion people to the world's population. So if the witnesses ever say to you they're reaching all corners and they're speaking to everyone, no way. I don't believe it, because there's half the world's population that will likely never even speak to a witness.
Yeah, I was just going to say that must be half the world's population. I don't know what the world's population is, but Google is my friend. We're going to find out in a minute.
If you're told something on a regular basis and the rhetoric is, oh, yeah, this is happening, and you never challenge it, you're going to believe it.
Yeah, of course you are. And also, if you're told something on a regular basis, the psychology behind that is you are more likely to believe it. That's where the kind of the misinformation and social media psychology of lies is, that if you see something often enough, you do just tend to believe it. And you're not, as you say, you're not aware of the gaps because you don't know what you don't know. So you can't be expected to really spot the gaps unless you like you think, oh, I'll look this up.
It's until you start questioning it that it's only when you start questioning it that you sort of have that realization. So the kind of headline figures, just for anyone who's listening that doesn't know, so every year Jehovah's Witnesses report their activity. So number of publishers, number of congregations, number of people baptized, new converts, number of people that attended the memorial, etc., etc. The 2024 figures came out last week, and the headline
Right.
figures that they've reported are that Jehovah's Witnesses are active in 240 countries, that they have an average of 8.8 million active members that we know as publishers, that they've had an increase of 2.4% from 2023, that they have baptized 296,000 new members, so that's the new converts, and that they have in total 118,000 congregations worldwide. So I kind of on the kind of top level, I thought those figures were quite impressive. But when you start to look at some of the background information and maybe compare this year's report to the past 5 or 10 years, it actually looks quite dire for them.
Really?
Yeah, I was shocked. I was really shocked. It was when I started comparing the reports going back 5-10 years, and I found that in North America and Europe, the increase is pretty much dead in the water. There's almost.
I wondered that. Yeah, my wild guess would be that first world countries where there's access to the internet easily and a higher level of education would have a zero growth rate.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I'd agree with that. And because when you look at the list of, well, I'll just turn to the list. So here we go. Quiz time, Louise.
Oh, good. I love a quiz.
The 10 countries with the most Jehovah's Witnesses in the world. Which countries do you reckon are in the top 10?
I would have thought America.
USA. Yeah.
I mean, is England in there?
No.
I don't know. France? I don't know. I've run out of ideas.
You've got the big ones. So USA, 1.2 million publishers. That's number one. Then the rest of the top 10 are Brazil, Mexico, Nigeria, Congo, Philippines, Italy, Zambia, Japan, and Colombia.
Is that because those countries are big then?
I think there is something to that, but also there's probably a few that stand out as a bit unusual. Italy. Italy got 250,000 witnesses. And the Philippines as well. I don't really understand why there's so many witnesses there. But what I did with those top 10 countries is I then did a comparison over the last 10 years of what the increase has been. And you could probably, I mean, you touched on it already. The African countries are the ones that are increasing. So Zambia, Congo, Nigeria are increasing, along with the Philippines. Then the South American countries, Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, are kind of stagnating.
Right.
And then the USA, Italy, and Japan are starting to decline. So it's really, like you were saying before, it's the kind of more developed countries.
Yeah.
Which you would imagine had better internet access, are the ones that are declining now, and it's Africa really where the big increase seems to be.
Africa's got the benefit of there's lots of land going cheap, isn't there? Because I know other countries are buying up African land for various things, and obviously maybe the governing body, they're a kind of a property company now. Maybe Africa's got a double benefit. One of the things I did think, jumping back to the Philippines and Italy, they're both Catholic countries.
Right. I didn't realize Philippines was.
Yeah, I just Googled it. It's 78.8% of the Philippines identify as Roman Catholic. And obviously, I know that certainly with Judge Rutherford, he positioned witnesses in direct opposition to Catholicism, didn't he? He had a very big beef with Catholicism. So I wonder if where people are in a strong Catholic country looking for something else,
Yeah.
Maybe the Witnesses presents itself as a nice, different Christian alternative.
Yeah, maybe. What's interesting about Italy is that there's been zero growth in Italy since 2016. So it's got to this
Really?
250,000 figure, and that hasn't changed since 2016. They are still reporting baptisms. I think I've got it written down here. It's something like 3,500 baptisms every year. But I imagine that maybe Italy is a country where a lot of people get disfellowshipped.
That's a very sweeping statement. Is it
Well,
because they're all really hot? And they're
I
all
didn't
sneaking
I didn't say
to
that.
do the naughties with really good-looking Italian men and women.
Yeah. Maybe if someone could sponsor us, we could fund a field trip and go and find out.
I think, yeah, we definitely need to do some empirical research, I think, in Italy. I did some mathematical analysis where I took countries and I took their literacy rate and something else. Might have been internet access rate, how much, how many people have, and I did a Spearman's rank correlation against the increase, and I plotted it on a graph, increase of Jehovah's Witnesses, and there was I think it was a negative zero point 0.9 correlation, which is quite a strong negative correlation, that the more literacy and education a country had, the less increase it had in the witnesses.
That's really interesting. So countries with, say, for instance, a 95% literacy rate would have less increase
Or
than a
no increase. Yeah. Yeah.
country with a 50% literacy rate.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I guess it's probably very similar with the internet coverage.
Which makes sense then why there's such an opposition to getting any additional education,
Yeah.
because education is directly correlated to people leaving, not just witnesses, probably all kinds of high control groups. And it's not because Satan's in the universities robbing you of your faith, which is what the narrative I believed at one time. It's
Yeah.
because you become more of a critical thinker, you meet different people, you're exposed to new ideas. It just broadens your mind in the same way that travel broadens your mind. And as your mind and your horizons broaden and you're willing to consider more things, you just start looking at everything, don't you, with a bit more interest and questioning, and then you
Yeah.
leave.
You don't believe everything that you're told. It's
No,
interesting.
or you start asking questions around it, and like you might even want to believe it, but you start researching it in the way that you might research something else at university or at college.
Yeah. The figures we were talking about for Italy, it was driving me mad for a while because I was trying to work out why for years and years and years they are reporting 3,000, 3,500
Yeah.
baptisms every year, but the number isn't going up. And I read this really interesting article by Paul Grundy on his website, JW Facts, I think it is.
It is.
And it talks about, in the figures, the witnesses obviously don't publish how many are disfellowshipped every year.
Or how many fade and stop reporting.
Yeah, I think he calls it the missing thousands. And he's done this
Right.
fantastic article where he's actually worked out, he's also factored in the death rate for each country. And he's worked out.
I did a piece of work like that as well. I did a maths piece of
Yeah.
work where I took the baptism, added it onto the previous year's publisher total, compared it to the current year's publisher total, and there's the gap.
So do you think that's what's happening in Italy then? Do you think it's disfellowshipping's a higher?
Or just, yeah. I mean, so they don't. I don't know how they've changed the number count, but it used to be people who reported field service. That's how they counted people, didn't it? Because
Yeah.
at the end of the month, they'd say, oh, even if you've just done a little bit, put a report in, because then they can count it. So if you fade away like I did, not disfellowshipped, but obviously I stopped reporting after so long, I'm not in the numbers anymore.
Yeah.
So there's the gap. So they report the headline figure of how many witnesses they've got. They report how many people have got baptized. But you're right, if the numbers aren't going up, I did do a massive spreadsheet about it, but I broke my computer and I've lost all my data on my
Uh,
on my hard drive. But you can work out the gap, and the gap is either disfellowshipped people or just people that have stopped going along. Now you can factor in the population increase. So I factored in the birth rate and the death rate.
okay.
And what I found was even where, say, a country was going up in numbers, it was only going up by the birth rate. So you
Okay.
could account for that by just the birth rate, the normal birth rate of people having children within their congregation.
I think we've solved the Italy question. I think we've answered it. So the field trip's cancelled.
Ah, what? We don't know that's true. We need to
Well,
be on the ground.
you've convinced me. Well, I think it does show that basically in these countries that we're talking about, in the USA, in Italy, in Britain, in Japan, the witness leaders have got this problem of they've got thousands that are leaving every year. They've got thousands that are being disfellowshipped.
Yeah,
They've got thousands that are dying because it's an older demographic in most
it
countries.
really is.
And they've got much smaller numbers coming in. So
Yeah,
they've got a real time bomb on their hand when it comes to some of these countries.
yeah, absolutely. So, just as anecdotal evidence, a long time ago when I visited my Alt Kingdom Hall, so when I was there as a teenager, there were probably at least 20 of us within plus or minus 3 years of my age, so quite a group of people. When I visited again, it was all the people that I knew, all my aunties and uncles, but because they were in the 70s now. And
Right.
now, because that was at least 10 years ago, they'll be in their 80s. And I did notice it just felt like a different congregation. In the 80s, when I was in it, felt young and vibrant, and there was a mix of all ages. When I visited about 10 years ago, it felt like visiting a church that's just full of old ladies.
And was the hall full, or was there a lot of empty
No.
seats?
Do you know what they'd done? They'd rebuilt the hall. So when we moved in to this hall, it was a really big cavernous space. And there were probably maybe 120 of us. And, like Sundays would be more and Thursdays would be less.
Hmm.
They'd rebuilt it. So it was a big, kind of rickety building. They'd built it in beautiful stone, but they'd built it a third of the size. So it was really elegant and beautiful and well furnished, but much smaller.
It's interesting because when you mentioned the 80s there, I can remember in the 80s and 90s, the hall that I was in, it was full to the seams. The congregation had to split because there were just too many people.
The 80s was that a kind of a growth time, I think.
Yeah, it was a lot of young families coming in, and the average age, I would say, would have been a lot younger than it is now. I can
It,
remember as well. So we split. So we were getting 150 to the meetings, and it was just too many. At the memorial, there were people stood in the foyer. They just couldn't get in the main hall,
oh,
and the congregation split. So we had about 75, 80 in each congregation. And for whatever reason, the numbers in each congregation just dwindled. People moved away, people upped and left. And we ended up getting about 40 to our meetings. And
oh,
pretty sure the elders took away 2 or 3 rows of seats at the back, so it didn't look so empty.
interesting. And there's another kind of statistic in there that we perhaps haven't looked at. Um, is that when they advertise how many halls they're building,
Yeah,
they're not new halls. Do you know what I mean? They're not adding on to the total number of halls. They're often rebuilds and refurbs of
interesting.
existing halls. So it sounds like, we've built 2,000 halls or whatever. But like my hall, it was a complete rebuild, but it was of an existing hall that was just a rickety building turned into a beautiful stone building.
When they report those figures, it sounds like they're expanding rapidly and building lots of new halls. But like you say,
Yeah,
many of those will be knocked down and rebuild on the same site.
yeah, and refurbs.
Interesting
Were
that.
there any other figures that jumped out when you were
Yeah,
looking at your yearbook?
there's loads of things here. There
Go
was
on.
one. So when it comes to Africa, so Africa is the real kind of boom continent for Jehovah's Witnesses. Just to give you an idea, in the Congo, in 2022, they had an 8% increase.
Wow.
2023, they had a 12% increase. And then 2024, they had a 9% increase. So
What?
it's really booming in Congo. Nigeria is similar, and Zambia is probably becoming quite similar in terms of growth. So there's a real lot of growth going on in Africa. I wondered what ratio of witnesses worldwide are actually African or living in Africa. And I think it is nearly 1 in 9 witnesses live in Africa. And in the next 5-10 years, if things keep going as they are, it's going to be 1 in 8. So that made me wonder, will the Jehovah's Witness leaders start to change the slant of the message in their literature and videos to cater more for African culture and less for American and European
That's
culture?
interesting. I was just going to say, when people used to say you're an American religion, and we used to say, oh, no, 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 we're not. No, 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 we're not. We're an African religion.
Yeah, going that way. Yeah. So it
Yeah,
makes me
that's
wonder
it.
that if they do start changing the slant, because obviously some of those countries won't be English speaking as a first
Yeah.
language. If they do change the slant of the message to cater for that, will it kind of disenfranchise, people in the UK or people in America because the message doesn't quite ring the same, does it?
No. And it always was like the imagery and the pictures. I know they were always very multicultural, but it always struck me as a very white kind of a religion.
Yeah, and it must be from their standpoint, it must be very difficult to produce literature that appeals to people of all countries.
Yeah.
So, people in Japan and then people in Mexico and then people in the Ivory Coast. It's almost an impossible job to do that, isn't it?
I know they have kind of lowered the literacy standard for the written text they produce. Like that was something that kind of bothered me when I was a witness, which was like decades ago now. But that's just because I was quite a bright kid. So I always felt like the literacy level was a little bit noddy. And I know that has reduced since I left because obviously they don't value education. So you're naturally appealing to a less literate and educated cohorts. And that would chime a little bit. I don't want to sound awful, but that is generally the truth, I think.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, because if you're producing a book on deep prophecies of Revelation, then that's going to be a lot harder to translate into African languages than some of the books that they produce today. Well, they don't really produce books anymore, do they? But yeah, the message has simplified. Another set of figures I was looking at, this was on the number of congregations and the number of kingdom halls. So there's a massive sell-off of kingdom halls going on. I was kind of staggered by this. So
I know somebody in Australia who's done a piece of work on the sell-off of Kingdom Halls because they feel, oh, I can't remember the story, but I think there's some thought that they are trying to cash in a lot to pay off,
yeah,
a lot of the court cases that
I would say
maybe
that
will
is
just.
almost certainly the case. So the figures, I wonder if that person has put those figures online, because I might have actually based my research on them.
Find out. I'll find out and get back to you.
So the figures that I have here is that in 2017, Watchtower sold 606 buildings. Now, I think we can safely assume that most of those were Kingdom Halls. Some of them will have been branch offices or other buildings that they use for printing, etc. So
Yeah.
606 sales in 2017, and then in 2018, 867 sales. Now, I don't have any figures more recent than that, but what I do have, and this was actually on one of the JW videos, which has since been removed because I think they realized that they'd shown it. So in 2018, they had 69,887 Kingdom Halls worldwide. In 2023, they had 63,000 Kingdom Halls worldwide.
No.
So they have sold off somewhere in the region of, well, it's just under 7,000 Kingdom Halls
Oh
in
my goodness.
5 years. So big sell off.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, big sell-off.
From that perspective, it makes sense, doesn't it? If you've got court cases looming and you know perhaps that your charity status is going to be removed in some countries, you're going to start looking at what can I sell, what assets can I move around. And what I did as well is I had a look at the number of congregations for 10 countries over the last 20 years. And I just compared them to see whether they were increasing or decreasing.
Oh, okay.
The countries that I looked at are the USA, Japan, Italy, Croatia, South Korea, Germany, France, Britain, Australia, and South Africa. The USA, for example, see what you think of this. The USA in 2015 had 14,063 congregations. That's their peak in 2015. They've now got 11,858 congregations.
Oh my goodness.
They've lost
That's a
some.
significant drop.
Yeah, it's well over 2,000 congregations lost.
But has the number of headline witnesses has not gone down commensurately then?
No, I think what's happened is they've perhaps looked at congregations that may be struggling and said, right, we're going to amalgamate you with the congregation 10 miles up the road and we're going to sell that building.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, because if your numbers aren't dropping by big amounts, but your Kingdom Halls are dropping, you're obviously getting people to share halls. So you've either got small congregations or you're needing money and you're selling off property and making witnesses travel further to go to the meetings.
So you're putting the cost onto the rank and file people. And what was interesting is because I thought about this with a congregation that I'd been in. We sold our Kingdom Hall and we went and shared with another congregation. And of course, the money, well, it didn't go in our pockets. It went
No, of course not.
To the headquarters. All these congregations that are disappearing, some of them, there will be Kingdom Hall sales involved as well. It's kind of disenfranchising, I think, because if you've worked on that Kingdom Hall, if you've laid the bricks, you've screwed the electrical fittings in, and
or you've donated your money or your jewellery or the stuff that they used to ask for.
Or you've not gone on a foreign holiday one year because you've saved up and donated a load of money to it.
Yeah.
And then it's been sold and the money's never been seen again. You're going to be a bit hacked off with that, I think.
But yeah, it's basically a straight up donation to the society, isn't it? Which you don't mind if you're putting that money in the box at the back and it's a straight up donation, but it's a kind of a smoke and mirrors way of getting people to give big property sized chunks of money to the societies.
That is exactly it. Smoke and mirrors is a perfect way to describe it. So the USA one, they had peak congregation numbers in 2015. Japan, I don't know about you, Louise, but Japan was always a country where there seemed to be loads of pioneers.
Oh, it was, wasn't it? And they were always being highlighted as, like everybody pioneered, everybody that was a witness, they were full on, but they are quite driven, aren't they, as a country in whatever they do?
Yeah, whether it's work or education. So, according to the figures, they started selling Kingdom Halls off in a big way in 2007. In 2007, there were 3,177 congregations. That has gone down every single year since, and they're now at 2,866.
Wow. And how, I mean, in those countries, when you get in the yearbook, as you, like your dad said, how do you spin that? Or your dad didn't say, how do you spin it? But he said, I'm struggling to find something positive. When you're looking at that at your country and you're just seeing the numbers drop each year, that must be really disheartening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if anyone does that kind of sort of research into it, but the figures are astonishing. So every one of those 10 countries, apart from France, has lost a significant amount of congregations. The one that's been declining the longest is Croatia. So Croatia.
I know why. I know why. It's
Yeah, I
because they've
think I
got the
might know
biggest.
why as well.
Sorry, carry on.
Uh, so they've been selling off Kingdom Halls since 2003, and they've been declining ever since. Britain's peak was a bit closer. So Britain's peak was 2017. And since 2017, they've lost about 50 congregations.
I know why.
Why?
I know why. Because we had our protest in 2018, didn't we, outside Excel?
Is that
And
what
then
triggered it?
obviously since then, the whole population of British Jehovah's Witnesses have just gone, oh man, that protest, it was so effective.
One of the things that always sticks with me from that protest, there was a young man who was dressed in his suit and his shirt, and he was walking past us that were at the protest point, came up to someone and said, "Thank you for reminding me why I don't want to go back in there." And
Oh
then he
man,
walked
yes,
off. I think he walked off home.
yeah, I do remember that.
Just brilliant.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
he obviously multiplied into 50 congregations quite quickly after we'd protested.
So the figures for congregations, it's on its way down in Europe and North
Yeah.
America. Obviously, it's on its way up in Africa.
This is the other thing I was going to say. Where you're losing numbers in first world countries where people have got money and disposable income, but you're gaining numbers in poorer countries where people really don't have a lot of money. That's not a good overall financial position to be in. Like, I know it's a religion and not a financial institution, so they shouldn't be thinking about that. But I think that's a realistic outlook for them, and that's why they've moved to property, because they're not going to be getting the donations in the same way.
And one of the new governing body members is a property mogul.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, I've
Ah,
just forgotten his name. He was appointed last year, and he had a real estate. Oh, I can't remember the name of it now. It's like a real estate company. He had like a special name for it, and he's on the governing
yeah.
body.
Oh, well, that's very telling, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I'm going to ask you about Australia because I do feel like the Australian Royal Commission on Child Sexual Abuse must have, really kneecapped the organisation in that country. Did anything
Yeah,
jump out at you about Australia?
I've just got a few figures about the congregations. It's only going back to 2021, but
Right.
yeah, absolutely. 2021 they had 748 congregations, and last year that was down to 717. So it is dropping reasonably fast, and there isn't any significant increase in publishers in Australia.
I remember the year after the Australian Royal Commission, I think they'd spent like however many million hours and not made a single convert that year.
Yeah, it's interesting
Yeah.
you should say that because they stopped reporting the hours, haven't they?
Yeah, I was going to say there's a few things they've stopped reporting. Haven't they stopped reporting the number of people who partake of the emblems?
That wouldn't
Right.
surprise me because the number keeps going up.
Yeah, I will check that out because I could just be talking out my backside, but I'll come back to you on that in another podcast because obviously that is quite important, really, if you believe that they are the 144,000 who are going to serve in heaven with Jesus.
So here's an interesting one for you. In the last congregation, were you just in one congregation, or did you move?
I've been in a few different congregations because I started off in Batley Dewsbury congregation, grew up there, and then I left home and was in Southampton Portswood congregation, where I think there were three congregations that shared one hall. And then I got married and we moved to Gloucester, so I was in Gloucester Kingsholm congregation, Kingsholm, where the mighty Gloucester play rugby, I should say, very important around here. And there were three congregations sharing a hall there as well. So I've been in one or
You've been in
two.
a good selection of congregations, really.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
When you were in those congregations, can you remember how many pioneers were in each one, roughly?
It was always just like a small handful, like maybe 4 or 5 tops.
Right, yeah. So similar to me, really. The four congregations I've been in, they've been between 4 and 8 or 9.
Right.
And I think that's about average for Britain. So in Italy, there are on average 18 pioneers per congregation.
I mean, heck.
And Italy has had 0 growth last year.
They must have really rubbish pioneers. What kind of quality of pioneer are they knocking out in Italy?
They're probably in the coffee shop or something. I don't
Yes,
know.
they're all just sat around being gorgeous, aren't they? Just like posing for Instagram photos.
Yeah, we'll have to go and investigate that.
I think we need so, yeah.
But it gets worse. So
Okay.
Japan, on average, there are 25 pioneers in each congregation, and there's been 0 growth last year. And it gets worse than that. This is by far the worst one I could find. South Korea, on average, in each congregation, there are 43 pioneers.
Oh my God.
And guess how much growth there's been last year?
Well, based on the pattern so far, I'm guessing in the region of 0.
0 growth. So I think at some point the governing body has got to ask, what the heck are these pioneers doing?
What are the South Korean pioneers doing? They're not even trying.
Yeah. Imagine having 43 pioneers in your congregation and not a single person gets baptized.
I shouldn't laugh. That's so soul destroying. Imagine being one of a team of 45 pioneers. Imagine being in a sales company and there's a team of 45 of you, and every year you sell exactly nothing.
Yeah, it is. And it does get really disheartening because I pioneered it was about 12 years, I think.
Wow.
And when you've not really got any interested people coming to meetings, or you've not got any Bible studies happening, it is really disheartening.
It is, and especially as you're told, we were always told, if you want a Bible study, if you want root cause, pray to Jehovah. Oh my God, I used to pray so earnestly and so hard, and it never made any difference. It was almost as if no one was listening.
And I suppose for some, they pioneer because it's almost like a bit of a social club. They get to hang out with their friends and they get looked up to by the congregation and almost treated as a type of celebrity. But year after year after year of doing that and not having any growth, any successes, he's going to wear pretty thin.
I remember my sister-in-law from a practice marriage in Southampton. Her and her husband were regular pioneers, and at a certain point she went to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed her with burnout, and they, like the elders said, take a little bit of time off. But it wasn't burnout, it was depression. It was depression. There was not, to be a young person with nothing in your life other than door knocking and not getting anywhere with it is really, living your life on hold is really depressing.
Yeah, and I think that's probably hit the nail on the head as to why there's so much depression and mental health issues within congregations.
Yeah, and alcoholism.
Yeah. So that was pretty much, I mean, the figures, the headline figures look good, but if you compare them to previous years, then it's on a downward spiral in the Western world and having a bit
Yeah.
of a resurgence in Africa. One of the things that changed recently is that Jehovah's Witness leaders said that 21-year-olds or men in their early 20s could qualify to become elders. And I was thinking about this because it used to be sort of middle-aged men. You'd
Yeah,
occasionally get an elder in his mid-30s or late 30s, but they're
yeah.
now openly saying if you're 21 years old, you can be an elder. I'm pretty sure that the governing body don't want a bunch of 21-year-olds running the congregation.
Well, I mean, elder's a misnomer, really, isn't it? If they should be called youngers.
Younger. Yeah, they might have to change the name to youngers.
But
Pretty
if they
sure
lower the age anymore, if they lowered it to 18, they could call them milksops.
milksops or teenies. Yeah. So it must be, it just says to me it's desperation. They,
Yeah,
they,
that does, doesn't it?
they must be on the cusp of running out of elders. And that, to me, is probably the thing that I think will cause the most problems for the figures, because your elders basically run the congregations, don't they, at
Yeah.
the lowest level. So if
Yeah.
they're running out of elders, what are they going to do?
Yeah. You know, if sisters aren't allowed to give talks other than those little tableaus where you face each other and you're not allowed to speak directly to the congregation, if you're running out of men to do those jobs, to do all those jobs, well, you're either going to have to have a radical view about trans issues, or you're going to have to let butch lesbians be leaders, or I'm just being creative here. I mean, I'm trying to help them. Or you're going to have to let women. No, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to, can't let just women do anything. So yeah, there is going to be a kind of a demographic problem, isn't there?
If anyone from the governing body is listening to this podcast, then we have provided you with some possible solutions to your elder shortage.
You're welcome. I'm going to do some research at some point, see if I can find my spreadsheet about the people taking their emblems.
No, that would be great. That and we could definitely compare notes on that in a future podcast.
Yeah.
I think at some point as well, it would be good to maybe have a little look at the finances.
Oh, massively. Yes, absolutely. That is a huge one because I think what I failed to realize, even for a long time after I left, is it is more of a financial institution than a spiritual one, but it's not immediately obvious.
Yeah, I guess so, because if they run out of money, then they have to start closing down and selling more Kingdom Halls,
Yeah.
regardless of how many cases they're trying to battle at the moment. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's about money at the end of the day, isn't it?
Well, thank
Yeah.
you for doing all that homework for us.
No, it's fine. I enjoyed it.
You absolute nerd.
Yeah, I am a bit of a nerd with a spreadsheet. But yeah, there we
Oh,
go. And I did discover a sneaky little move that the governing body have made.
yeah.
So if you want to find figures in the yearbooks, you can find them on their website back to 2017, I think it is. If you want to go any further back, because 2017 isn't that long ago, if you want to go any further back, when you look on the publication online, it says, for the figures, please see publication. But of course, no one has the publication anymore because it's all gone online. So unless you've got a stash of old yearbooks sat at home, then the figures are going to be a bit of a mystery to you going back that far. So there's a person who has very kindly put every single report from 1981 to the present day onto a website, which anyone can look at.
Really? What website's that? We can put it in the show notes.
The website, yeah, put it in the show notes. The website is called avoidjw.org.
Yes, fantastic. And if I ever get my hard drive recovered, I've probably got the information, not all of the the raw numbers, but some of the headline numbers going back before that, because I think I tried to go back as many yearbooks as I could. I'm like that Welsh guy whose cryptocurrency's under the pile of rubbish. It's not under a pile of rubbish, it's on a little hard drive in my school bag. I don't know how to unlock it.
Yeah, hopefully you can retrieve it, because it would be interesting to look at that.
Yeah.
Have we got time for a little excerpt from January's letter to the elders?
Oh, I was going to say, have you got a letter? Yes, please.
So, a letter was sent to the elders January 2025. It covers quite a lot, actually. I won't read most of it. I'll just read you this a little bit. So we were talking before about the shortage of qualified men to actually run the congregations, because they obviously won't allow women to do anything.
Obviously.
So in their letter to the elders, they have an announcement that they are instructed to read to the congregations. And it says, in part, we are happy to announce that baptized and unbaptized exemplary publishers who are 15 to 17 years of age may accompany their parents or legal guardian who has been invited to assist with theocratic construction projects, maintenance projects, or disaster relief work in the vicinity of one's local congregation. So if there's a hall being built or a hall being refurbished, they're looking for a bit of free child labour now, because the age has been lowered to 15.
That is very relevant, because I got a message tonight from a friend who has been doing some representation about modern slavery, and she believes that a lot of the work that children do, such as on building sites and things for kingdom halls, is classed as modern slavery, and she's been putting submissions into different government, and that might be something that is worth discussing in a future podcast.
Yeah, that's good, that, because when you think about it, you don't get paid for any of the work that you do. And
no, you don't.
You kind of, although no one's holding a gun to your head, they are, metaphorically, if that's the right word. There's
not a huge choice about it, is there? The pre-assembly work, the Kingdom Hall building work, the hall cleaning, there's a lot of work that goes on, a lot of work. Nearly everything that is done on free labour, which does necessarily involve children. We'll have her on, an interviewer, and she can tell us a bit more about how she feels that what happens fits the legal definition of modern slavery.
Brilliant. That would be good to hear about. Yeah. Excellent.
Well, thank you very much, Adam. That was really fascinating for all of our 2 viewers who I fully trust are maths nerds.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. If anyone has anything they'd like to tell us, the email address is still in the show notes. Please email us anonymously if you wish.
And thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Yep, bye everyone.
It's not who you say.